Chapter 6. The noise on the starting grid was almost deafening. The roar of 15 road bike engines, tortured to the point of bursting, finally reached fever pitch as the starter finally waved his flag to signal the first road rash of the season had begun. Then in an instant we blazed off along the tarmac. The crowd cheered and waved off the first race of a brand new season. Tensions had been tight before the race had started. None of the riders had spoken much, each preoccupied with his own thoughts, or hers, how could I forget? But now we were off. In a blur of colours, noise and smoke, the race had truly begun. Practically, the sole human contact I'd had prior to the start had been from Natasha. She slinked over to where Slater and I were watching the crowds gather. She looked even more mouth-wateringly gorgeous than I'd remembered. "Easy there, boy," whispered a squeezing Slater. He gripped my arm as she approached. "I hear you're the new boy. Welcome aboard," she announced plainly. "Some of these jerks would rather fight than race. Watch yourself out there." And then, with a flash of a smile, she walked off again. I couldn't believe it. I hadn't said a word. I just stood there doing a great impression of a goldfish. Oh, could I really have goofed up any worse? I mean, really? I'd look like a suffocating trout. And let's face it, in a world full of eager, eligible bachelors, a girl like Natasha wasn't going to make a beeline for the bloke with the interesting repertoire of humorous animal impressions now, was she? Desperately, I tried to concentrate on the race ahead. I looked around, trying to make like a sponge and soak up some of the atmosphere. It hadn't been what I'd expected at all. All the hustle and bustle had taken place in the hastily erected start line and at the finish in the village. The camp had been surprisingly sober in the preparations. I'd been told that word had gone round all the local biker clubs that the Rashers were back in town, but it seemed like every single inhabitant of the local area, along with friends and family, had turned up to watch. The place was like some bizarre street carnival, the racegoers allowed to enjoy their day out, the real money men behind the event having done their wheeler-dealer business weeks before. Each sponsor basically hired a Rasher for the season. If the Rasher won a race, then so did the sponsor, in the series of bets and trade-offs that accompanied this illegal sport. That's if he won, or she. Hey, don't think I was preoccupied with women or anything, I'm a pro. I kept my mind on the racing, and the racing only, and pigs do fly. And everyone was scared. This was illegal racing, right? There were no official doctors, no watchful course supervisors and no ambulances. It was all out war and everyone knew it. There was a real danger of doing yourself some damage out there. Back on the track, I was doing my best just to keep up with the pack. The noise grew so intense that you felt your eardrums would burst as the smell of burnt rubber mingled with the heavy clouds of exhaust smoke. But in just a few heart-pounding seconds we'd left the thunderous start way behind. The fresh air rushed into my face and immediately the group started to spread out. I settled down into a racing tuck and kept the throttle twisted to maximum. My bike entered the race pretty much in the same condition as I'd arrived at Sierra Nevada the previous day. Slater and I had tinkered with the engine, but there was little to be done. I kept the bike running as smooth as silk on my own, and yesterday's attempt to achieve nuclear fusion between $4,000 worth of motorbike and a cow had done practically no damage at all. To my bike, that is. I can't speak for the cow's feelings on the matter, but there was one big difference. Overnight, the Rash mechanics had installed a small race computer on my handlebars. As the pine trees raced past at what was already approaching an adrenaline-pumping 120 miles an hour, I marvelled at what a miraculous piece of engineering the race computer was. This was what separated the road rashers from the boys. This was why we earned megabucks, and the hotshot boy racers in the cities ended up in jail. I guess we were just professional about it. The little self-contained unit incorporated a radio transmitter, which kept control fully updated on my current position along the 4.7 mile course. When this data was compared with that from the other bikes, they could tell who was in what position. This information was then radioed back to my computer, and a small digital display kept me informed of my standing. But it did more than that. It also identified my nearest competitor, and this was useful. When you're hurling down a road at 120 miles an hour, you've got a lot more important things to look out for than the identity of your opponents. And in standard road rash racing levers, I guess we all look the same anyway, Natasha accepted of course. I quickly put such distracting thoughts out of my head, and I spared a quick glance down to see that everything was working properly. It was. My computer told me that I was in 15th place. Yeah, I knew that alright. The new boy always starts last on the grid. one of the few rules of the sport, and so far I'd done nothing to improve on my position. But hey, it was early days yet, and I wasn't going to risk blowing out on my debut appearance. No, this was one race I was just going to finish. Winning could come later, and I was sure of that. The first couple of bends were taken at pretty much maximum speed, but we all negotiated them safely. Still, that was no reason to slouch about. I kept my throttle twisted to the max as we approached the first really tight bend. The pack had spread quite thinly already, and I hoped that Slater was up there among the leaders. I figured the guy needed a break after yesterday's run-in with the police, and I owed him a personal favour. Yeah, I hoped Slater was doing okay. But I quickly realised that there was no time to worry about anyone but myself. Already up ahead I could see riders buffeting each other, and if I was going to do anything other than dawdle around on the back, then sooner or later I'd have to get involved myself. I took a perfect racing line into the steep bend and leaned out of the corner at maximum revs. The screech of tortured rubber and sprinting engine was deafening. As the trees rushed past inches away from my face, I drew up close behind whoever it was in 14th. Again, I risked a glance down at my computer and saw the flashing name of Hammer. "Okay, Hammer," I said to myself, "let's just see how tough these races really are." Inch by inch, I got closer and closer until we were level. My computer read out alternated between 14th and 15th as we raced neck and neck. Slowly, inch by tortured inch, my bike pulled ahead of Hammer's. The Shuriken's eager engine screamed, and then, as if in a split second, I pulled comfortably away. My race computer's position read out, clicked down a notch, and I was in 14th place. It felt good, very good. Maybe this wasn't going to be as difficult as everyone said it would be. "You know, player," I took a few seconds out to muse, "Slater was right. You do it once and you're hooked. There's no getting away from it. Once a rasher, always a rasher," I grinned and laughed to myself as my lead over Hammer grew. All of a sudden, I was feeling confident. "Player," I shouted, "you're going to clean up. This game is the one game you've been waiting for all your life. So let's show these hotshots what a real race is." And it was going to be easy too. It seemed truly incredible, but as I looked ahead of me, I realised that most of these guys knew nothing about racing lines and cornering. Okay, so I had to admit defeat when they started talking about leaping cows. It's later maintained and that it was a regular occurrence, and I had to believe him. I don't know, it's hard to explain, but when you meet the guy, it's kind of easy to figure that leaping a cow is just the sort of thing he does every weekday afternoon. But I'd done more than my share of circuit racing. I'd been coached by an ex-pro, and how to steer in and out of corners had been lesson number one. It was so obvious, but why couldn't the rashers see the logic? It was amazing. If you use the full width of track available to you, you can cut down on the angle on a corner to almost nothing. Go into the corner wide, leaning tight, moving into the corner, then accelerate out hard the other side. But these guys weren't doing it. Some of them took the corners as if they were taking a driving test. Okay, so they were fast, but in terms of technique, they were really all over the place. I checked my rearview mirror. With Hammer left comfortably behind, my computer flashed the name of Gunther. "So he's the dude that could do with some lessons in riding," I muttered, and slowly pulled up behind him. Another big right-hander, then a big left-hander as the road dived and climbed. Then all of a sudden I saw my chance. The steady growling of our two engines melted into one as I approached from behind. We were sprinting up a hill, my bike cutting through the exhaust fumes of Gunther's machine. I was almost close enough to reach out and push him, but I was going to ride this race fair. The brow of the hill grew closer and closer, and my moment to strike grew nearer. I'd been watching Gunther corner. He always went over the brow of a hill on the right-hand lane. It was lunacy, but there you go. Maybe he was superstitious or something. Each man to his own, I guess. In the distance, I'd seen that over the hill there was a right-hand turn. This was my advantage. If I took the left-hand lane, the correct racing line, I could take the corner at full tilt and then swoop back across the road to overtake. Simple, basic schoolboy stuff. Only 1 mile into my first ever road rash, I was going to make my mark. My heart pounded in my chest as we raced past the pine trees on the side of the road. As we reached the top, I swung hard out to the left, as in preparation for the big corner up ahead. I laughed as I saw Gunther steadfastly sticking to the right. We thundered over the brow of the hill, and as we passed the top, I glanced across at my adversary. In less than a second, I would be ahead. Grinning, I waved to my opponent and returned my gaze to the road ahead. I thought I was going to die. I made to scream, but no sound came out. Coming straight towards me was a car, less than 20 yards away. At my 120 mile an hour and his 80, that was a clear head-on collision velocity of 200 big ones. With reactions faster than I ever knew was possible, I hammered on the anchors and desperately lunged for the side of the road. I missed the car by inches. I felt the rushing air buffet my careering bike as it ploughed still further off the road and into the dirt. I lost control. There was nothing I could do, as together my bike and I skidded straight into a tree. Whoosh, swallow, crack. I stopped very quickly. You know it's true what they say. A Diablo 1000 may well be able to take you from 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds, but a finely tuned race prep tree trunk can take you from 200 mph to 0 in no time at all. For the second time in 2 days, I felt myself chewing bark. Tree trunk 2, player 0. I couldn't believe how stupid I'd been. This wasn't a racetrack, this was the open road. There were other road users. Player, you are one dumb sucker, I cursed to myself, feeling just as if I had stars spinning round my head once more. I painfully jogged back to my bike. I was furious. I was way down this field in a glorious 15th place again. My first ever road rash, and I'd made my mark alright on yet another tree. Not what I'd had in mind at all. I quickly ran back to my bike. Luckily it didn't have too far to run. Got on and angrily kicked it into life. I was not going to finish my first ever race in last place. I had 4.3 miles of the race left to run. I scraped the mud, grass and dubious natural substances off my visor, accelerated hard and wheelied to the painful accompaniment of screeching rubber back along the road. Gritting my teeth, I started chasing the miniature figures of the other racers way ahead of me.